If you think about a large company, oftentimes cybersecurity risks are they may get away with paying hefty fines. But for small and mid-sized companies, these risks could have an existential impact. It could wipe off a significant part of the P&L because one instance of severe non-compliance could actually make them lose customers.
How critical you are to the growth of these companies.
So trust is a currency when it comes to companies selling or belonging to regulated industries. So even if you can get a couple of POCs done with a narrow group of users in a large enterprise company, you will not be able to cross the IT security threshold. When we started Scrut, we'd already fallen in love with the problem, and we had crossed the stage where we were romanticizing it. We had actually hard, cold feedback, objective data, extensive primary research on the problem. We have companies that have less than 5 people often come to us because they want to get started with ISO 27001. They can't even convert their first enterprise deal because of that.
A lot of companies can also position themselves as automating compliance. And how would you say that? How is Scrut Automation different?
How do they rely on Scrut's native intelligence and judgment to really form a point of view on what to prioritize and how to remedy it? And that is something that we strengthen very aggressively with our forward deployed security analysts.
Generative AI. What is generative AI for Scrut Automation? Is it a friend? Is it an enemy? So how big is the market opportunity?
$45 to $50 billion market. It's a massively under-penetrated market which is getting started.
Our deepest desire is often our destiny. So what is your deepest ambition?
I think for me, an Indian company which is outside the Israeli or the US mafia, building a cybersecurity company that's found its footing in the global stage.
Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. With me is the leadership team of Scrut Automation today. Now, Scrut Automation is a pretty interesting company. What it does, it basically takes the compliance headache of small to mid-sized technology-first companies. Now, taking away the compliance headache is one thing. It actually converts that blocker into a growth enabler for companies. With me starting this conversation right now is Ayush Ghosh Chaudhary. My idea is to decode the playbook and the growth strategy of the company from 3 lenses: product, engineering, and growth, because this company is not only doing very well in India, but it's a product doing extremely well globally. So Ayush, it's my sheer pleasure and privilege to have you on this series.
Well, thanks for having me here. I feel good. I feel fantastic.
Okay. Ayush, let's begin sort of from the beginning. How big was the problem of compliance for companies which you felt? I think a lot of companies look at compliance as a checklist problem, but to really convert that blocker into a growth enabler, how did it actually start?
So this is a problem that my co-founder Jayesh and I felt when we first tried a hand at entrepreneurship as we were building a previous company, which was essentially selling supply chain software to large enterprise customers. And we realized the pain firsthand when every enterprise conversation after the first couple of pilots or POCs would run into a very detailed IT security assessment from the IT or security team at these large enterprise customers. And we realized that while large enterprise customers today, or the best of companies today, are generally open to working with small and mid-sized tech companies, that really wasn't the case 10 years ago when it was mostly the legacy players. But they expected small and mid-sized companies to also be very responsible with their data and hygiene cybersecurity practices, which manifested in them having to comply with a bunch of frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, GDPR, HIPAA, etc., and depending on the nature of the industry and the geography they were selling into. And oftentimes, when you compare a small and mid-sized company to the large enterprise counterparts, large companies are very well instrumented. They have large budgets, large teams. They have an array of tools that they can use to, and they've been using for a long time. But given the compliance and cybersecurity problem has become very urgent and almost existential for small and mid-sized companies over the last decade or so, we realized from our first-hand experience that there was a glaring hole in the market when it came to serving that category of companies. Because enterprise solutions couldn't be force-fitted into small and mid-sized companies where teams were small, budgets were lean, expertise was low, and the baselines were also just being developed. So, combination of our outside-in research and the pain that we felt firsthand, we realized that there was a gap in the market. We dived in. Of course, we've learned a lot of things along the way. We're probably in the 100th version of 100th iteration of where Scrut is, but our conviction in the problem has continued to grow stronger. Now, if you think about a large company, oftentimes cybersecurity risks are they may get away with paying hefty fines, or they may get away with buying very expensive insurance. But for small and mid-sized companies, these risks could have an existential impact. It could wipe off a significant part of the P&L. Uh, it could potentially create business shutdowns. It could suddenly make them lose half of the revenue base, because one breach, one incident, one instance of severe non-compliance uh, could actually make them lose customers, or they may not win those customers in the first place. But think about a typical, say, 200, 250 people fintech company or a health tech company. They do not have very sophisticated security teams, especially in the US, where labor is also expensive. They do not have the necessary expertise to build all of that in-house. Uh, so it's maybe a team of 3, 4 people looking at compliance, risk, infosec, all of it in a fairly aggregated manner. So what Scrut does to them is provide a very pragmatic alternative to having to work with like an array of disconnected enterprise-grade tools. All of it is fairly aggregated and consolidated in one place. Uh, Very quick time to value, of the order of weeks, not several months, as is the case with typical enterprise-grade tools. Uh, and what it also allows these companies to do is really have a common view of where the risks lie, both from a compliance and even outside of compliance, across the infra, across the resources. Uh, and that's the majority of our customers. So more than 70% of our customers are small and mid-sized tech companies belonging to heavily regulated industries like health tech, fintech, large enterprise software, etc.
So, how has the conversation evolved with these companies from your first customer to where you are right now? I mean, because what is fascinating that it is built in India for the globe, right? So the challenges, the problems, are they different or are they similar?
Well, at the core, the problems are very similar. If you look at India and Southeast Asia, so we have two major blocks of customers. North America is a big block for us, and the other big block is India and Southeast Asia. We started in India and Southeast Asia because this was right in our backyard. We were very familiar with the geography, but then the ambition was to go global from day one. So when we compare how compliance or infosec or risk management happens in this part of the world as compared to North America, uh, at the core, the security controls are very similar. The security threats and risks are very similar, because technology at its core, we work with a lot with cloud native tech companies. The technology is very similar. The sources of risks are very similar. The resources are very similar. Where it starts diverging is there are local regulatory nuances. Like RBI has a bunch of SAR guidelines or requirements for fintech companies in India. New York has NYDFS, California has CCPA, the Europe has GDPR. The US in general has the NIST 800 framework. Some geographies prefer SOC 2 over ISO 27001. So while the regulatory requirements or the articulation of these requirements vary from framework to framework, and there are local geographical nuances, what we've done is we've abstracted the actual controls out of these frameworks, so that on a day-to-day basis, a company which is selling in simultaneously, let's say in North America, Europe, and Singapore, doesn't have to worry about the specific regulatory nuances there. Since it is sufficiently abstracted, there is a lot of commonality. And to the extent that there is overlap, there is no duplication of effort.
That's very, very fascinating, Ayush. Tell me one thing, that from a small and mid-sized IT company perspective, fintech company, health tech, and you spoke about, if I don't take care of this headache, which is you're taking a lot of it, what kind of revenue loss is that I'm talking about? How are you actually contributing significantly to the revenue expansion of these companies? I mean, how critical you are to the growth of these companies?
The impact is not incremental. It without So trust is a currency when it comes to companies selling or belonging to regulated industries, particularly fintech, health tech, large enterprise software, uh, wherever there is sensitive data involved, wherever there is a possibility of a supply chain attack involved. Uh, Either the regulatory environment, either regulators or your customers will demand that you be compliant. So even if you can get a couple of POCs done with a narrow group of users in a large enterprise company, you will not be able to cross the IT security threshold. And that assessment sort of becomes gate opening. So the impact of this is not incremental. Uh, it could actually be very existential. Companies may not even get. We have companies that have less than 5 people often come to us uh, because they want to get started with ISO 27001, because it's becoming a blocker for they can't even convert their first enterprise deal because of that. Now, the complexity involved in implementing the same set of frameworks or standards will vary. as the companies grow, as the resources grow, as their asset footprint grows, as the number of people grows. But at its core, compliance becomes an absolute deal breaker. You can't get started.
So, would be fair to say that you were also having to create the market in terms of market education.
It is a busy category, and there are many compliance automation players, generally speaking, now in the market. I think for us, something that we've been almost maniacally focused on from day one is taking a very risk-first view to the whole GRC problem, because we belong to a category of software called governance, risk, and compliance. Now, some players are very compliance heavy or compliance only. Uh, some players are compliance and compliance adjacent. In our case, we've been very risk focused. So what it means is that our cybersecurity capabilities that are intrinsic to the Scrut platform have been deeper. Our integrations when it comes to surfacing risks automatically have been deeper. There is built-in intelligence that allows customers to automatically prioritize risks and carry out remediation tasks on them, including helping with the last mile orchestration around. So if you have a risk that gets generated and gets flagged to a DevOps engineer, how do you answer questions at that level around what code snippets could be generated, and what breaking changes would ensue, right? So we've been very risk focused. That's been our swim lane, and we continue to compound that.
Tell me one thing, Ayush, that trust infrastructure isn't an obvious term. So, how did you explain that to customers?
We don't have to. This is a category where, I mean, for us, there's been a very strong pull. Uh, in most of our conversations, we actually never have to build a financial model or build a business case or build an IRR model for the CFO. The need for something like Scrat is very obvious, because companies don't deploy something like a Scrat for incremental productivity gains. They do it because they have to debottleneck. Even if they were compliant with a lot of the frameworks that they intend to comply with, like a SOC 2 and ISO, their operations have reached a certain complexity where doing it on spreadsheets, Google Drive folders, or doing it in a very ad hoc manual manner in a point in time manner just doesn't cut it anymore. For example, they could have been building an entire inventory of assets on a spreadsheet that takes a few weeks to populate. But their infra has reached a scale, their asset footprint has reached a scale where by the time that spreadsheet gets populated, the footprint has changed again. Instances have been launched, the previous instances have been retired. So it's just not practical to do it in a manual manner anymore. So they are using Scrut to debottleneck that operation, because otherwise it would be a mammoth task to have so many people working on it continuously. And even then it wouldn't be as real time or updated. So for us, it's a very pull based sales process.
The pull-based sale process. And I think what I can gather from this conversation is that we have established the fact that if companies don't necessarily do this, I mean, it's actually calling for an existential crisis. So, how big is the market opportunity, if you were to tell me? How big can this really become?
GRC as a market is depending on which report you refer to, and but we validated the bottom up analysis about a $45 to $50 billion market, uh, software and services TAM combined. But the part of the market that is really our ICP, that we really go after, that we really very sharply focused on, is the small to mid-sized tech companies.
Scrut did not necessarily take shortcuts, which others did. Why? Because from what I'm understanding from this conversation was that you are just beyond compliance. And there's a very deep understanding of what really these kind of small, mid-sized companies really want. So why is that? I mean, like you did not take any shortcuts. Was it like a thinking? Was it like a kind of feedback coming from the market, which you escalated back into the product?
I think for us, two, three things have worked well. So, I mean, the reason why people would take, and we've grown at a pretty phenomenal pace over the last 4 years, uh, and we continue to double our revenue still year on year. The reason why people would sometimes be inclined to take shortcuts would be to maintain pace, uh, maintain velocity of shipping, maintain velocity of customer acquisition. But in our case, we've been able to balance both. We never had to do that because the way our teams are structured. So if you look at the co-founding team, when Jayesh and I co-founded the company, Kush joined us as a third co-founder. And Kush has been in the industry for the last 15 odd years. Initially working with the compliance team at Wells Fargo, came back to India, ran his consulting business for about 11 years. So very deeply embedded. He's the absolute subject matter expert. Uh, He's one of the authority figures when it comes to auditing for SOC 2, ISO in this part of the world. Uh, our CISO in Seattle, Nick, he was part of the team that drafted the latest NIST 800 framework in the US, was doing cybersecurity in the Obama administration in the US. Uh, Even our engineering head comes from an RSA pedigree, working on risk management use cases. So we've assembled a team where we've had a very strong day one hypothesis on how things should look like. And Jayesh and I felt this problem firsthand for more than a year when we were building the previous company GoMigo. The other thing that's worked well for us is we've been very close to our customer at all points of time. So the thing that we did differently, so typically a lot of players in the category would have account managers that would work with customers and helping them onboard in the platform, but in a very commercial sense. But in our case, we've always had forward deployed security analysts working with our customers in the trenches, keeping a close watch on where they're facing problems, where they're hitting roadblocks, and actually answering the infosec questions, almost working like extended team members for them. And that has allowed us to retain very strong feedback loops across modules, across categories, across every new release that we've had.
So, talking about learning, when you said you've also had a lot of hand holding, your customers came in, you co developed go to market strategy for the US market. So, you were not necessarily building a flashy product. What you were building was trust infrastructure, and that too an invisible trust infrastructure for companies, and trying to sort of really establish the fact that this could potentially be an existential crisis for you. Good in your case because they realized it themselves. What has been the role of a VC firm like Endiya partners in that journey? I mean, how do you think that how have they contributed, if at all, in your growth?
I think it's been a phenomenal partnership. Uh, and if I have to point to what's been the best part of working with a VC fund like Endiya that specializes in working with seed stage companies, right? Uh, they've been a sounding board. We never had the pressure to package things a certain way or communicate things with a certain way or manufacture finesse in a conversation. We've been very direct, very vulnerable. They've always been available. Most of our conversations with India have been without organized decks or collaterals. They've been on whiteboards, on napkins in cafes, right? Uh, and that approach of working with a seed stage company as it goes through various stages of emotional turbulence, failed assumptions, course corrections, but just being patient, being calm, being receptive. I think that part of working with India has been the biggest advantage.
Generative AI, right? I mean, the buzzword right now, from the newsrooms to corporate boardrooms, right? What is generative AI for Scrut Automation? Is it a friend? Is it an enemy? How are you dealing with it?
It's a very close friend. It's a very close friend and companion. It's allowed us to and so there are a couple of things that serendipitously turned out very well for us. So when we started, we were very clear on two things. One is, given our risk focus, we will always have the forward deployed security analysts that I mentioned earlier, working with the customers in the trenches, helping them navigate this complexity, right? So if we are more risk focused, if we are more security focused, we are generating 4x the number of signals that our competitors or peers would generate. Uh, our customers need to be able to make sense of it. And they often lack the expertise or the capacity internally to prioritize, to understand what the remediation next steps would be, to really build focus. And our forward deployed analysts helped our customers do that. That was a decision we took from the very first day, and that's worked out well for us. The second decision we took was, given we were generating a lot of information across their misconfigurations, across their cloud infra, vulnerabilities in their code bases, uh, using libraries that had known vulnerabilities in them, just employee actions that could potentially create risk. So a variety of information was being generated, many signals were being collected, but we always wanted to make sure that that context across the company compounds. So the quality of decisions you take based on that data is not point in time, but there is a compounding component to it. It gets better as CRUD spends more time in their environment, right? That memory retains.
So, Ayush, tell me one thing now with this entire generative AI coming into the sort of background, 10 years from now, what can Scrut really become? In terms of product, what really are we talking about? I mean, you really have the pulse of the problems of these small, mid-size IT cloud native companies. So you know them very, very well. You are on their growth journey. So pretty much whatever problems will keep emerging, you can keep solving them from time to time, right? So Scrut will also evolve from a product perspective, from what you're offering, because what is at the core of Scrut? You are translating trust into software, and trust will evolve, the nature of trust will evolve, and the nature of software will evolve, right? So 10 years from now, what do you really think? Just from a radical perspective, what can that really be?
I think for us, we are, and there are various approaches that companies take when they think about adulting or just the next phase of growth. Some move into more categories, some move up market to the enterprise. For us, we're very clear on one thing, that we will continue working with small and mid-size, maximum upper mid-market tech first companies, because those are the kind of companies that would proliferate the most over the next decade or so. And that is where the bulk of fluidity lies in terms of what risk management means. And with that almost obsessive focus in place for Scrut, what it would mean as a company is getting into more parts of their security and IT stack, and not just limiting ourselves to compliance, which we never did because we've been always risk focused. And that has allowed us, that has necessitated that we build more cybersecurity or information security features as compared to many of our competitors. So if I give you some examples, even today, uh, most customers of Scrut use Scrut as their primary cloud security tool, and they choose it over the native cloud security scanning capabilities of the cloud service providers or other open source tools, because for a variety of reasons, Scrut is the most pragmatic alternative that brings everything together. We're now getting into application security, now we're getting into endpoint security. So the idea for us is remain focused on that ICP, not distract ourselves, but cover more parts of their IT and security stack, bring it all together so that Scrut becomes their operating system for risk, uh, and which is heavily powered by agents. That's at least how we think about this. We see that as a $30 billion opportunity, which we aggressively want to capture over the next 10 years.
So tell me one thing about disruption, disrupting Scrut. Do you think that's a proposition it can become difficult because now you are so deeply entrenched in the life cycle of the SMBs that you're obsessively after? So a new product, a newbie coming in right now, like a DeepSeek came, and it was like these Chinese kids, banger up a product, came in and sort of really, really sort of challenged ChatGPT. But you are now very deeply entrenched in the life cycle of these SMBs. So for a new product having to disrupt you is a difficult proposition. Can one say that?
There are parts of it, and I think uh, the workflows can be imitated, dashboards can be imitated, inference can be made easier. There could be more alternatives. We could be, when we started using Cloud Opus, moved to Cloud Sonnet. We use a combination of Cloud Sonnet and a bunch of uh, open source and open weight models. We're now doing a bunch of it in-house using Llama models. We could start using DeepSeek tomorrow. So inference, the nature of inference could vary. It could become easier. It could become cheaper, more expensive. But I think our core defensibility lies in the compounding context that we build with our customers. And that is very native to us, very native to our customers. It's almost sacred between us and our customers. And for any new model provider to come in or any new tool to come in to replicate that context, which by the way compounds the longer a customer spends time with us, that is generally going to be hard. Of course, everything is doable, but I think that's where our primary defensibility lies. So yes, I mean, parts of it could be replicated, uh, but the bulk of the value lies in the compounding context that we build with our customers, and that is hard to imitate.
I mean, the core of the business is trust, which you have built with the company. Then you've translated that trust into software. Uh, Ayush, now, if you were to give me like what keeps you awake in the night, one key challenge which you think that sort of really sort of keeps you on your toes from Scrut perspective, what would that be?
I think for me, it's just trying to understand where the blind spots lie, uh, because I think we have a great team in place now that I don't have to worry about the current quarter or the next or even the quarter after that. I don't have to worry about the accuracy of our forecasts or meeting our forecast because there's a very consistent compounding motion in place that and the team has come together very well. I think for me as a founder, as a first time CEO, what I focus on the most and what I feel somewhat anxious about the most is what am I missing? What do I not know? How do I keep myself updated? How do I talk to people who've been through a similar journey, gather as much feedback and notes as possible to see the things that I'm not able to preempt because most needle moving changes take several quarters to manifest. A bad decision today could could have ramifications 4 quarters out or 5 quarters out.
So, Ayush, how much is your revenue base push versus pull in terms of customer traction? How much are you having to pitch, and how much are customers are sort of walking in by on themselves?
There's always a so the demand gets generated very fluidly for us, and again there's an entire demand generation setup which is spread across both India and the US. There is a marketing team where if you're selling into SMB and mid-market companies, velocity is important, demand generation in an efficient manner is important, and we've been the most efficient, and I can say this with a lot of conviction and on good authority that we are actually the most efficient asset in this category that's maintained uh, very high burn efficiencies, magic numbers, quick ratios, whichever way you choose to metricize it. Uh, we built a very efficient engine. And I think for us, while there is a very strong inbound component to it, there is still education required to the market because there could be multiple approaches to solving it. It's a competitive category. And we continue to try and find more efficient and cool ways of educating the market on why our approach, which we feel very strongly about, is actually pretty good. And oftentimes, this education has to happen even before you have the prospect talking to you in a sales conversation.
We have spoken enough about you, Scrut's journey, and such fascinating insights. I have to put you on a hot seat. It's time for rapid fire. So, one word, quick answers. You ready for it? Okay. Compliance, burden or advantage?
Advantage.
Okay. First customer emotion that you remember, fear or relief?
Relief.
Want to talk a little more about that? How was it getting your first customer on board?
Oh, like I knew nothing about B2B software selling for this, and especially in an SMB context. So the first, like, it was a, and we didn't. The first customer came through like a blast of emails that I sent out to everybody I could think of, and I was, hey, this is what I'm building.
Like cold email.
Absolute cold emails with an honest admission that this is still WIP. There's something I'm figuring out. I built a version that barely works, but would you be interested to speak with me? And then had 8 or 10 prospects respond to me. I said, look, it's okay. Let me see what you're building because I have a few deals which are stuck and I don't know where to get started. And your email came at the right time. And if you can solve this problem for me, then we have something going. I can be your design partner. I can help you refine the product, but solve this problem for me. I can't make a sale happen.
One decision that changed Scrut's trajectory.
The decision to hire very strong leadership in the company.
And building in India for the globe, easy or misunderstood?
I think it's heavily misunderstood.
Okay. One metric you obsess over most?
Customer satisfaction, CSAT, NPS.
Okay. And if you were to describe India partners in one word, what would that be?
They've been like co-founders.
Trust. Is it a feature, product, or a mindset?
It's a mindset. It's a mindset for sure. Because a lot of what we do requires our customers to come in with a lot of intent. And without that intentionality preceding any sort of implementation of any GRC tool, Scrut or otherwise, would not really succeed.
Which startup, besides yours, you're overawed with?
I would say Databricks.
Any Indian startup that you can name?
I'm thinking maybe Rubrik, Indian founders. So let's say Rubrik. I am a very like B2B software person. I like those ones. So
what is like the ambition that keeps you going from Scrut's perspective?
I think for me, it's breaking stereotypes. Breaking stereotypes around, an Indian company which is outside the Israeli or the US mafia, building a cybersecurity company that's found its footing in the global stage, created something meaningful, created thousands of happy customers in a category, and all categories within cybersecurity tend to be very competitive. I think that for me is the biggest motivation, just breaking stereotypes around working in a cross-border setup, working in a remote setup, building a company on cybersecurity company out of India, making it something meaningful globally. So yeah, that's the primary driver.
Thank you, Ayush. Thank you for joining us today and giving a sneak peek into yourself, your mind, and the trajectory of your company. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So we just heard the founder at Scrut. Now it is time for the investor take. With me is Satish Andhra, the managing partner at Endiya Partners, those who actually wrote the first institutional check for Scrut. Satish, my first question to you really is that GRC is not necessarily a greenfield play. There are all kinds of players, the incumbents, startups. When Scrut came to you initially, what was it really about them which actually told you that here's a defensible play, and what you saw which others did not?
So actually, the origin of GRC, happened when cloud became mainstream. If you really look at enterprises started adopting cloud and then were purchasing, software on cloud. So SaaS kind of became mainstream. One of the key questions for enterprises is like, the privacy and the compliance. And so the startups that were delivering innovative products and services obviously had to be compliant and give them the SOC 2 compliance or ISO 27001. So while they had ambitions to go sell to enterprises, what was kind of gating them was the fact that to give them this sense of assurance, saying that everything we do on cloud is kind of safe and risk free. So the fact that it's gating their revenue ability to scale and is something is a great opportunity. And we know that cloud is like global opportunity. While it's happening in US, it's growing in Europe, significant growth in Asia. As always, laggards leapfrog from a technology perspective, embracing cloud because subscription, lower cost, your IT is managed by someone else, the hyperscalers. So we kind of stitched all these facts together and said that there is room for automation here, and then tie that into compliance, whether it is ISO 27001, HIPAA, GDPR, PCI DSS, SOC 2, all of that. And in Scrut, obviously as an early stage investor, we really look at the problem and the team that's really solving that problem. In Ayush and Jayesh and Kush, we found a team with complementary skill sets and the hunger and passion to grow a company from India, for the region and for the world. And that's kind of what clinched it for us to write the check.
Thanks for that, Satish. You wrote the check and not necessarily stopped only at the first institutional check. You came at Series A, Series B, and very well positioned for what's coming next. That's a pretty strong and unusual kind of commitment, if you will. So what did you see in Scrut at Seed, which basically compounded and is becoming more and more visible now?
So I think in the 0 to 1 journey, it's really about building the MVP and, bringing in a team together, executing your go-to-market strategy initially, learning from that, the feedback from the market. And then the next steps, a Series A, Series B are all about scale, right? So always I look at initially entrepreneurs are trying to prove that their idea is right. So they're finding customers who are willing to buy at any cost. In the next phase, they want to sell to an ideal customer. Like in the following phase after that, they really want to sell profitably. And in the final phase, they want to dominate the market, right? So when you go through this kind of phases, that's how a company evolves. While we define it as pre-Series A, Series A, Series B, Series C, but the predictability, right? And the ability to dominate the market, the ability to position very crisply, the ability to deliver value proposition that is theoretically stated, when you go do the sales pitch, this all become real. So for us, it's really measuring that growth and, a very healthy growth and see how the company is evolving, right? And where the leverage is coming from. That gives us the confidence. And, obviously we have a seat at the table and ringside view of what's happening, and we would double down. And that's been an approach that we have followed at Endiya, from the very beginning. We're not a spray pray approach. We take concentrated bets and we double down and put significant amount of capital. Even our LPs would also invest, work as co-investor. They come in and support these companies. So to the entrepreneurs, we tell them that, listen, between Endiya and some of our LPs, we're going to give you, $10 to $15 million now. So go to work and don't be too worried about fundraising, as long as you continue to solve the problem and deliver the metrics primarily.
And talking about concentrated bets and being there for long term, what really sort of gives you conviction that Scrut is on the right path? They began with GRC, now getting into application and AI teammates and so on. Do you think that they are really focused? It's a smart portfolio expansion and not necessarily chasing every shiny object in the security market?
No, I think you need to understand, the needs of your customer, right? And Scrut does that really, really well. I mean, if you really look at the way they've scaled their business, 60%, 65% of it comes from North America, rest of it comes from other regions in the world. In a mid-market customer that you help, especially healthcare or financial services or technology businesses that are all leveraging cloud to deliver, software to enterprises, these set of companies do not have strong IT teams. If you go to an enterprise world, you have a CIO, you've got a CISO, you've got a network team, you've got a desktop team, data center team, applications team, customer support, help desk, all of these. And there's even IT analysts, who work with lines of business. But for mid-market organizations, the lines are very blurred. So typically, the same IT director of operations is also looking at security. So, Scrut's moves, in terms of building a conversational AI interface through teammates, is very good, because that's an extension, they've built on top of their GRC platform to enable this quick conversations and probing, by the security teams to achieve the compliance objectives. Now, if you look at move into, a bit of application security on the dynamic application security testing, and then cloud, the buckets configurations, absolutely, you're delivering more value, to the same customer who will not be in a position to deal with many best of the breed vendors. They look for integrated platform providers. And that's something Scrut does really well. Of course, we need to see all of this in action, and then we need to make sure that the ACVs go up and customers appreciate what these folks are offering. The good thing about the Scrut team is that they really, primarily brainstorm well, structure their thinking, do the pilots, validate that in the field, and then kind of scale them up. So I'm very, very confident that you're going to see a company from India, delivering this for the global customers. That's why I'm pretty bullish. This is not a pivot. This is kind of really addition to what you're doing. And that's primarily driven by your customer requirements.
Thanks for that, Satish. If you were to describe the Scrut journey in one word for yourself, what would that be?
I think, Andy Grove said only paranoid survive. And absolutely, there's a team that has Olympian mindset and incessantly strives to get better every day. And that's kind of what we really like about the team.
Thank you so much for that, Satish. Thank you for giving us this kind of perspective on your portfolio company, Scrut.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, we get a ringside view of Scrut Automation, which was born out of a simple but difficult insight. Compliance, when treated as an afterthought, becomes a bottleneck to growth. But when designed as a system, it can become a competitive advantage. Scrut chose to build for rigor over shortcuts, for long-term trust over short-term velocity. In a startup ecosystem that often rewards rapid shipping and surface-level solutions, Scrut's journey highlights the quieter, harder work of building credibility with chief security officers, auditors, and enterprise buyers who do not forgive fragility. The journey was not an easy one. Scrut's founders navigated early product assumptions, customer resistance, regulatory complexity, and the operational weight of getting compliance right. Backing right at the seed stage, Endiya Partners is a strong architect, but in the background. The focus is not on check size or speed, but on conviction, alignment, and supporting companies that build foundational layers of the digital economy. This perspective reinforces why trust infrastructure demands patient capital and why a VC firm like Endiya is particularly suited to companies like Scrut that prioritize durability over hype. Scrut is now building for the next decade because trust is never finished, it is continuously earned.